Hey everybody, what's going on? Welcome back to my channel. I had to come back basically from the depths of the Shadow Realm just to make this video because, well, with the whole Nintendo Switch 2 situation regarding the Nintendo Direct as of, well, yesterday, I'm a day late on this. I must say that I am not as impressed as I thought I would be. The one thing though that does blow my mind, and it's the thing that I've always wanted, is the mouse ability on a video game console, whereby you can use the left side of it as a normal joystick, and then the right hand side is a mouse, which I think is pretty cool. And for me, that is like the biggest, most mind blowing feature ever. And the fact that it took this long to implement for basically a console, that's wild. Now, as far as the Switch 2 goes, yes, there's been some changes here and there. It's got two charging ports, which I think is also interesting. Cool, thanks. If one breaks, then you got obviously got a secondary one. Also, it can be used for like a webcam. If you got it into dock mode, then you can charge it from the top, which I think is absolutely cool. I mean, I wouldn't really say no to something like that on a handheld device. I mean, these things can get finicky over time. Maybe they'll break, something will happen. It's all weird and things like that. But there are a few things that do concern me, and I can also understand why it's occurring, and there's a lot to talk about. So effectively, one is the price of the Switch itself, or Switch 2. It's going to be 450 USD, and I've read somewhere else that it's going to be 399 in Japan, and it's just 450 if you want the version with all the language packs, basically. And that's effectively some sort of a tax, I would guess, that's being charged to the international market. I suspect what they're trying to do, in my opinion, is Japan is probably going to be their biggest market, their biggest target market. So by making it cheaper over there, they can obviously sell and push more games that way, and then live off of those sales. And the rest of the world would be playing catch up. Because you also got to understand as well, as much as the Switch 2 is going to be a new console, there's already a long list, a long lineup of existing consoles out there. And I, being a parent, I know $450 can go a long way for a kid. If you really want to, that can go a very long way. To be clear with you, here I'm in South Africa. $450, that's basically your school fees for like a year and some change for a kid in a high school. If you send them to public school, that is. So you got to think about it. Like, if things are tough and things, will you really buy a Switch 2 for your kid, knowing that it'll cost you less to send them to school for an entire year, kind of situation? Yeah, that's one perspective I'm looking at. The other thing I can also, obviously look at and understand is inflation. Unfortunately, money just doesn't have the same value that it had 10 years ago. $450 was a lot more money than it is now, and there's a lot to take into account. The original Switch launched at $299, which is now, I think, the price of the Xbox Series S, and even to now, the Switch has never dropped in price. I've never seen it go on sale. I've never seen a reduced price. I mean, the worst or the biggest reduction in price I've seen is on the used market, and that's usually like about $10 or $20 cheaper than a new one. So I don't know what's happening. Obviously, you're going to have the situation as well with backwards compatibility. So luckily, or is it forwards compatibility? How does that work? Anyway, backwards compatibility. Yeah. So there are some Switch games that will work on the Nintendo Switch too. I'm not exactly sure as to what the library lineup is, but there are some that will have that little upgrade feature, something like how you had like the PS4 to PS5. You just pay a bit of a subscription or an additional fee, $10 or so, I would assume. I think that is it. I can't remember the Nintendo Direct. I watched it a few hours ago, and you're obviously going to be paying a bit extra and getting the thing in there, right? Now, what bugs me is that how many of these games over time will receive this upgrade? Is it going to be like 50% of the major titles on the Nintendo Switch that are going to get it? Because I know some games, in my opinion, I would think would probably need it. And the other thing as well I got to keep in mind is the Switch has a different panel, so it's running at 1080p natively on the handheld, basically the device itself, and apparently it goes up to 120 frames per second. I mean, they even mentioned that in their Metroid Prime trailer. Now, here where it gets a bit interesting for me, some games apparently support 4K in docked mode. The thing is, I don't know to what extent you're going to get a lot of games doing that. And I would think that given the size of the device and probably how powerful it's probably going to be, I would think that eventually it'll come down to a stage where we're going to just get 4K games at 30 FPS in the future. Over the years, unfortunately, the hardware will not keep up with the games that'll come up. That's just my opinion. Yes, developers will squeeze as much as they can out of it, but I don't see a situation whereby it's going to be like 4K 120 FPS right until the end of its lifespan. I think some sacrifices are going to be made here and there for games that have more advanced visuals or more open and expansive worlds as opposed to what it is currently. Now, a few things you got to keep in mind. There is some good news. I mean, getting like Final Fantasy on the Switch 2, which, okay, cool. And then also the big one is Cyberpunk 2077. Now, yes, it is an old game at this point in time, about 5 years old, I would think. And yeah, it had a rough launch. But let's be realistic. If you can play Cyberpunk 2077 on the go and at like really good frame rates, 1080p, I mean, hey, why not? Go ahead, do it. It's an amazing game. I finished it 2 years ago and I loved every single bit of it. I mean, it was absolutely fun and amazing, and it has some glitches here and there, but that's just one of those things. Now I don't know in dock mode what kind of results you'd get. Maybe in handheld it'll be like 1080p 30, and in dock mode it'll be 1080p 60. I can't imagine that being at 4K on the Switch too. I could be wrong though. We don't know what we'll get. Maybe some sacrifice will be made here and there to get it to 4K. We don't know. Now, as far as the library of games go, there is going to be a ton of launch titles for the Switch too, but the one thing I do want to focus on is the GameCube titles that are coming up. Now, they got a few here that are listed up and lined up for launch or with launch of the system or whatever it is, and you're obviously going to be subscribed to their services that are relevant to that package. On top of that, you get to purchase a Nintendo GameCube classic-ish style controller for the Switch 2. And there's a bit of fine print at the bottom. Basically, it's one per customer for every account there is. And at the moment, it only ships to Canada and US. So the rest of the world, I'm not too sure. Like, I'm in South Africa. We're not going to get that probably. I'm guessing. I could be wrong. So, yeah, it is a bit of a rough start for some people, I would think. One, the price is off-putting. And then there's also the issue about the games. Apparently, digital games are going to be costing like $80 with physical games costing $90. I am honestly just at this point thinking, is it really worth it? Like, I am going to be realistic with you. You can buy a used PlayStation 3 for $60, and for the extra $30 you can get about 10 games with that. I'm not saying this because I think you should be playing all games. I'm saying this because people have options. The Nintendo Switch 2, the visuals look like it's a decade old. That's my opinion. I could be wrong. Maybe I'm just looking at it in the video and through the compression on YouTube. But this looks like graphics on a PS4. For $450, you can buy a used PS4 and a lot of games. I mean, the average used PS4 in my area goes for about $170 with one controller, but that's like the base model PS4. And then games go anywhere from like $5 up to like $20. So even if you were to buy like 10 games at $200, then you're looking at another $170 for the console. That's $370, and you've got yourself a used PS4 with good games that basically look the same as the Switch 2. I'm just saying that, I'm not saying this to put the Switch down, but it's just that there's a lot of options available for this price point, and there's a lot to be picking and choosing from. And the other thing to keep in mind is it's not too far from the pricing of a PS5. In fact, a used PS5 is even cheaper than that. So what kind of games are you going to be playing? I mean, you're definitely going to be playing the Sony exclusives. So if this is going to be like one of your first console purchases in a few years, then there's a lot to think about and a lot to take into consideration. I mean, I would personally buy a used PS5 and say goodbye to the Switch 2. It's just the way I am. It's just who I am. It's not saying that that's how you should be. But if you're going to be buying this, or if you're going to be buying a console after a very long time, the PS5 is basically more than halfway through its life cycle. There's plenty of units available on the used market. Games are also getting cheaper and cheaper. I mean, I see like Spider-Man 1 for the PS5 going at like $20. The Spider-Man 2, I've seen that go for around $35. So I'm not saying this because I think that the Switch 2 is inferior. I'm saying this because it's launching. Yes, it's good and all that amazing stuff with it. But at the same time, there's so many options and so many competitors that when the Switch 1 launched, there wasn't a Steam Deck. There wasn't all these other options with these handheld PCs. And obviously the Switch 2 is probably going to outpace them as far as performance goes, and it's obviously got the first party exclusives from Nintendo. All those things to take into account. And, aside from that, I'm not trying to say that the Steam Deck and stuff is going to be, well, completely destroyed or anything like that. To each their own, depending on the library that you like, and performance-wise, there may be some differences here and there. Obviously, Switch 2 will get its life squeezed out of every single component in there. But as far as consoles go and costing goes, there's a lot to take in and consider over here. If you are a hardcore, die-hard Nintendo fan, chances are you're going to pick up the system. And I get that people are going to be selling their Switch 1s for like about $200 at this point. And with all of their games, and maybe even asking for like an extra $50 for like 10 games, selling each game at like $5 each to get like $250 out of it, pipe in another $200 over there on top, and then buy this console. Who knows? And then obviously transfer over their digital library with it and whatever subscription services they have. People can do that. Not saying that it is impossible, not saying that it won't happen. Or maybe all those people who've been stockpiling all of those Pokemon games will just sell like 10 of them and be able to afford it. I don't know. But what do you guys think about the whole situation regarding Nintendo? I mean, as far as the Switch 2 goes, are you really going to pick it up like day one? I know I'm not. I really don't see a need to. My backlog is now 30 years long, 3 decades long, and I was genuinely looking for and some sort of a system which I can take on the go with me. And the Nintendo Switch 2 definitely looks like the most robust system, in my opinion, as far as handhelds go, as far as a gaming experience goes. I would personally pick it over the Steam Deck. It's just that the library itself is going to be a determining factor together with the pricing. Unfortunately, Nintendo has a way of limiting supply and obviously keeping the price steady. So it's going to be 450 all the way until the end of its life cycle. Alternatively, it'll just increase with inflation. So it's not like you can get it cheaper anywhere else unless you're going to buy it on the used market. There's that to consider, or maybe you buy one that fell off the truck or or the ship, if you know what I mean. Um, but yeah, I mean that's basically it, guys. Would you really spend this amount of money? Or are you just gonna like bite your teeth and wait 2 more years for the PlayStation 6 to launch? I mean, everybody's expecting that thing to come out in like 2027, and the way I look at it, that's not too far from now. I mean, think about it. You got GTA 6 coming out. Will we get GTA 6 on the Switch too? I doubt that. Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. I don't see it as, I don't know, a console that you would buy if you want to play the latest games, unless you want to play like the Nintendo Switch exclusives. Because if you want to play the latest games, those are already covered on the PlayStation. PC's got you over there as well. Well, eventually it gets it. But like all the new titles that are going to be coming out, single player games, whatever it is, the more competitive titles, would probably come out first on PlayStation and then eventually onto Switch. Or maybe it'll launch simultaneously, but there'll be some performance differences here and there. I don't know what to say about this beyond. Let's wait and see what we get. I mean, there are some games that look a bit promising, like, well, the Bloodborne spin-off over here. Obviously, due to copyright laws, Nintendo, which they are famous for, wants to avoid some sort of a situation, so they just call it something else. I think it's called Dusk Blood instead of Bloodborne. It looks like Bloodborne, though. It just looks like a reimagined or reworked version of Bloodborne. Like one of the builds they just had lying around. Like, hey man, remember that cancelled build we have? Can you just pull that out and let's just touch it up and clean it up, and then we'll slap it on the Switch 2 and call it a day. I don't know. With that being said, guys, I'm out of this video. Let me know what you think. Do you think it's worth it? Do you think it is a waste of time? Are you going to be forking out this kind of money, or are you going to be like me, just hold on to it and see what happens sometime in the future and really whether it's really worth your while? Who knows? Maybe this might go the way of the Wii U. I highly, highly doubt that it'll happen, but you know what? It's happened once before. Who knows where it'll go from here? With that being said, guys, I'm out of this video. You have a good one. Let me know in the comments what you think. Until then, have a good day. Goodbye. Don't forget to like, subscribe, share, and also leave a dislike if you hate this video. Goodbye.